Let's get one thing clear right away. Without any help from the hyenas, Scar never would have been able to take over the Pride Lands successfully. They were the driving force behind his villainous rise to the throne, and without them, the relatively feeble lion wouldn't have been able to maintain his position as king. That being said, a lot of fans still might not know exactly how Scar came to meet his loyal hyenas in the first place. Fair warning though, most of the ideas that Disney and fans have come up with can be pretty tragic, but I suppose that fits with Scar's storyline in general, doesn't it? Believe it or not, it stands to reason that Scar has known his 3 hyena companions since he was just a young lion. This is coming from what little information was given during the 1994 animated film along with the prequel book, A Tale of Two Brothers, which was released shortly after. You see, even if the original Lion King film didn't specifically show the moment that Scar met the hyenas, with how familiar the lion was with the clan, it's safe to assume that he knew them pretty well by that point. Or at least, he definitely met them and began working with them prior to Simba being born. Otherwise, Scar would have had to introduce himself to Shenzi, Banzai, and Ed, rather than what he actually did in the film. If you don't remember, Scar showed up right as the 3 hyenas were bad-mouthing lions, and even though the hyenas were concerned at first, once they realized who it was, they literally said, "Oh, Scar, it's just you." This comment clearly showed that the hyena trio and the lion were already well acquainted. Interestingly enough though, The Lion King, A Tale of Two Brothers, gives us a more accurate timeline for when Scar met his cackling minions. Now, like the movie, the book doesn't show fans the exact point in the lion's life that he met Shenzi, Banzai, and Ed, but it does show that they were familiar with each other. Most of the book is from the perspective of Rafiki, as he tells the story of Mufasa and Scar from the very beginning, and according to him, it all started with those hyenas. According to the book, as Rafiki first made his journey to the Pride Lands, he was attacked by Shenzi and her partners, but thankfully, Rafiki was rescued by Mufasa, Scar, who was going by Taka at that point in his life, and their father, Ahadi. A day or so after the attack, and after Rafiki settled in, he had already grown suspicious of Scar and started to spy on him. Rafiki followed Scar to a dry watering hole where he watched the lion meet with the 3 hyenas and actually warned them of his father's impending wrath. It was at this point in the book that the hyenas convinced Scar that it would be a good idea to make Mufasa look bad, and, in a way, initiated the conflict between the 2 brothers that would end up lasting an entire generation. Although Scar clearly already had some issues with his family, which you can tell by the way he acted in the movies and the book, he wasn't actually acting out against his family until the hyenas put that idea into his head. No matter how you look at it though, according to both the movie and the book, Scar clearly had a relationship with the hyenas long before the events in the Disney animated classic. But will the House of Mouse ever actually show fans how Scar officially met his henchmen? Well, believe it or not, they did. Though it depends on whether or not you consider it canon due to it happening in a Disney Villains comic book. In the 3rd issue of Disney Villains, Scar comic book series, which was written by Chuck Brown, they explained that Scar went out looking for the hyenas' help and ended up with 3 misfits instead. You see, according to the comic, Scar's 2 vulture friends, Kabir and Crass, convinced him to meet with the hyenas, and when he did, he witnessed something truly strange. The queen of the hyenas, Zuhor, had just ordered the rest of the pack to eat one of their own, and it turned out the hyena that was supposed to be dinner was none other than Shenzi. In the comic, Scar stepped in and stopped the cannibalistic ritual by requesting something from the hyenas. He wanted their help to take down his older brother, Mufasa. The queen was curious about Scar's request, and though she wasn't willing to part with the strongest members of her pack, she did end up offering Scar the one that they were about to eat. At that moment, Shenzi became Scar's first minion. The lion didn't waste any time though, and immediately requested more hyenas to aid in his quest. Zuhor surprisingly complied, and let Scar take 2 more members of her cackle. And as you know from The Lion King, the other 2 of course ended up being Banzai and the ridiculous Ed. The trio then accompanied Scar into the Pride Lands, and from there, the villain's real mission to take over began. But what if I told you there was more to Scar's relationship with the hyenas than them simply being his puppets to take over the Pride Lands? Interestingly enough, there are a few credible fan theories floating around out there that do a great job explaining how Scar met the hyenas, only instead of Scar using them for his own personal gain, it might have been the other way around. According to this theory, The hyenas actually sought out Scar long before he was ever actually called that. This was back when he was still Taka, which, as you may know, means trash or waste in Swahili. The theory suggests that Taka likely felt rejected and alone based on the way that his father, Ahadi, openly favored his older brother, Mufasa, over him. This is also shown in A Tale of Two Brothers through Scar's resentment towards Mufasa. A lot of it came from the difference in how Ahadi treated them. That being said, according to this theory, a lot of those resentful feelings were planted into Taka by the wicked hyenas, and if you're into the Lion King fanfiction, you'll know that a lot of them have already incorporated this concept into their stories. Most of these suggest that the hyenas were ordered by their matriarch, who according to Disney villains, was Queen Zuhor, to turn Taka against Ahadi. The only reason the matriarch wanted this though was to secure the Pride Lands for themselves, at least according to this theory. Now, it makes a lot of sense that the hyenas would want to leave the Outlands, especially when you consider that in The Lion King and The Lion Guard, the Outlands were described as being a bad place to live. On top of that, the idea that the hyenas hatched a long-term plan to put themselves at the top of the food chain in the Pride Lands does seem to fit with the theme of the Lion King villains. Think about it, both Scar and Zira had implemented long-term plans to secure their places at the top, both of which took a lot of cunning strategy and years of patience. If this theory is accurate, the hyenas might have even convinced Scar that his father and brother were both shutting him out intentionally and that they didn't care for him. Also, considering the fact that Scar was already working with Shenzi, Banzai, and Ed at the beginning of A Tale of Two Brothers, perhaps their plan was already in place at that point. Now, with all of that in mind though, what would you say if I told you there is a chance that Scar didn't meet the hyenas when he was young? This alternate theory suggests that Scar was already a full-grown lion when he decided to partner up with the hyena trio. Now, it goes without saying that in order for this theory to be true, you would have to exclude certain books and comics from being canon. But since the idea of what's canon and what isn't is something that's constantly debated, it's ultimately up to you to decide what you think is true. In the case of this theory, some fans believe that Scar didn't fall in line with the hyenas until he was an adult. That's because, according to most sources, Scar didn't really start to distance himself from the Pride until he had already grown up a bit. If I had to guess, it wasn't until he challenged Mufasa for the throne and lost that he actually started isolating himself from the group. After doing so, he still would have harbored a lot of resentment toward Mufasa, and in his solitude, would have had a lot of time to plan a way to get rid of him. Well, according to this theory, that plan was to team up with the hyenas and remove his older brother from power once and for all. This would explain why Scar didn't have any emotional or sentimental attachment to the hyenas by the end of the first movie, because they were merely pawns to him. Another version of this theory suggests that when Scar began separating himself from the Pride, the hyenas were the one who took notice and decided to use him instead. You see, if you take the Lion Guard storyline into account, then the hyenas likely knew that Scar once had the Roar of the Elders until he lost it after using it on his own Pride. Well, according to the theory, the hyenas saw Scar's moment of weakness and preyed on it. They knew that all they had to do was build up the lion's ego, and then they would have a strong pawn of their own to use against the Pridelanders. It could have been the other way around too. Scar could have easily been the one who approached the hyenas after losing the roar. After being essentially shunned away from the rest of his pride, he may have felt so lowly of himself that he needed companions of any sort. And this theory suggests that the hyenas would have been perfect company for Scar. In the end though, there really is no way of knowing how Scar truly met the hyenas that he worked with for so long. At least, not until Disney confirms it. I'm curious though, which of these theories, or Lion King subplots, do you think is the most accurate depiction of Scar and the hyenas' relationship? Be sure to let me know in the comments below.